Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to be talking about document automation, operational efficiencies with AI, and really how can you improve your processes? How can you automate a very document intensive world assisted by AI? A very quick note on who I am. My name is Saurabh Gupta. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Cloud Compliance and GPTfy. We are a Salesforce App Exchange ISV partner, and we focus on data security, data privacy, AI. So on the App Exchange, who I am, my name is Saurabh. So on the App Exchange, we have products like GPTfy for enabling AI on your Salesforce. We do sandbox data masking, data retention, right to be forgotten portability, things like that. I spent about 7 years at Salesforce prior to co-founding Cloud Compliance and GPTfy. With that, a quick disclaimer or safe harbor for those of you who are familiar with that term. This is definitely not legal advice. We do not represent Salesforce's point of view. This is just our individual perspective based on working with customers, being a customer ourselves, working in the trenches, and everything that is provided in this document, in this event, spoken here by our speakers, is purely for informational purposes. Again, not legal advice. With that out of the way, a nod to our sponsors who have put in time and effort to help make this a reality. We very much appreciate their help. And enterprise dreaming came together because there were a lot of questions that we kept on running into along these two lines. Folks want to understand the possibilities. What can you do with AI? If it's Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, Health Cloud, document automation, financial services, things like that. And then on the delivering with AI side, what can you do if you want to embark on this journey? How do you make a business case? How do you address privacy, security? Do you build, do you buy, or do you build your roadmap? So we are on this session here, and tomorrow we have 2 more sessions in this space. So that's kind of the lay of the land here. With that, a very quick overview of what we're going to be talking about. We'll do the introductions of speaker. I have Anand with me, who's a fabulous speaker and brings an incredible amount of knowledge. Very glad to have him here. We'll talk about what are the automation challenges, document automation challenges in the enterprise today, what works, what doesn't work. And then we'll talk about what can you really do with AI when it comes to document management. We'll talk a little bit about some of the considerations from a security and architecture perspective, do a little bit of a demo. We have a very interesting demo on how documents can be analyzed by AI, which I think would be very interesting to the audience. And then we have some resources and takeaways and some Q&A. So with that, I will turn it over to Anand.
Thanks, Saurabh. It's a pleasure to be here and pleasure to reconnect with you. By word of introduction, Anand B Narasimhan, based out of New Jersey. I spent a lot of time with enterprises. Up until this past January, I actually was part of Salesforce Services. I used to run their large transformation programs from an overall delivery and technology perspective. So I've done several large transformations. Enterprise was what I did for many long years in a multitude of domains. And then this past January, I decided to kind of come and join another former Salesforce colleague who started this company called S-Docs. So I'm essentially the CTO of S-Docs, product engineering, support, professional services, anything that comes to technology is part of me. I've been kind of watching the open AI and the AI tsunami, as Mark Benioff calls it, kind of on the sidelines a little bit, because like most enterprise innovations, there is a bit of a hype, and then there's like a bit of a lull, and then it finally takes into kind of comes into mainstream. So we'll look at it. Saurabh, I lost your slides, by the way, so in case you're not sharing. So that's me. I'm looking forward to this session, and let's get this party started, I guess. So before we go too far into enterprise and AI, let me give you what S-Docs is. If you have worked with S-Docs, thank you. But S-Docs really is a end-to-end document automation solution. You can kind of build any sophisticated document, merge data from anywhere in Salesforce and probably externally as well. And then you can do document generation. We have customers that do an esoteric work, like printing certificates of completion, to highly complex secure where, in the public sector, highly confidential documents. And then we also have an electronic signature product that laps on top of that, where you can kind of like complete electronic signature end to end. We do all this completely on top of the Salesforce platform. No external integrations, data doesn't leave. So therefore, it's super secure, super scalable, super fast. And our vision, and Saurabh, if you don't mind, go to the next slide. Our vision is really to kind of make things easy, simple for your end users, for your customers, and essentially make the work flow a lot better with S-Docs. That's what we do. And since it's Dreamforce, we've got another 2.5 weeks to Dreamforce. We have a booth at Dreamforce, and we've got a lot of fun events coming along. Do visit us at booth 1325. Meet with us. This deck will be shared, so you'll have this link. We've got 2 sessions. How to talk about sales and sales operations and sales automation as it pertains to document automation, and then compliance, which is a big thing in general for regulated industries. So we've got a couple of sessions, and then we've got a whole bunch of like parties. We're doing one with Carasoft, which is like a large public sector, and then Pickleball, if you're a fun, and then Salesforce Ben. If you've been in the ecosystem, you'll know who Salesforce Ben is. So we're sponsoring those events. I'll look forward to meeting many of you. I'll be there. I'll look forward to going there. So let's start with the challenges in document automation in the enterprise, right? So documents are key to a lot part. Like if you're in the sales domain, it's contracts, proposals, invoices, bills, amendments, renewals. If you're in the service, it's service letters, a lot of the complaint letters. If you're in public sector, it's constituent letters. If you're in HR, it's recruitment process and application process. So documents, even though a lot of us probably have a view of documents as like this, Word document or a PDF document, documents becoming more and more digital. And then this notion of document is changing. And particularly in the enterprise, if we want to look at the process of how a document is put together. So sort of, if you want to go to the next slide. So this is like a good illustration of like the document process, right? So you're starting with the conception, the initial draft, and even there's like different templates. What data do you want to bring in? Are there rules to it? All of that gets assembled into this kind of asset called a document. Then you're sending it out either internally for review. Then you're sending it out for external, especially if it's a contract or an MSA or an NDA. Then there's like back and forth that comes. Then there is like approval processes like, hey, I want my payment terms to be this way. We can't do net 90. We have to do net 120. If you've been in the Salesforce space or even in just sales operations, this is very typical. And in a typical enterprise, I would almost multiply this 10x or 20x. That's the number of steps that it takes to kind of get a document through and getting something signed. As much as there is a long tail from a lead to sale, this adds to that, right? So if a sales rep's got a large lead that's coming in and they have a large prospect, they have to go through all these steps. And if you click one more, Saurabh, it's not even just the steps, it's actually the interrelations between these steps. So you go 2 steps forward and then you come 2 steps backwards because something that the customer or the legal team changed now requires approvals, or you need to go all the way back to your data because you got the wrong products, or the customer decided, hey, my budget's kind of squished, so I'm going to have to take out these 2 products. Oh, by the way, can we add these 2 companies into because we just acquired. So there is just so many moving parts, and there's this back and forth. And realistically, I mean, even though it looks like a simple diagram here, at the end of this, if you just trace all the paths and the teams and the people that go through this, you're going to get like a nest, like a complex spider web of a nest. And navigating that has a lot of challenges, which results in, what I'll kind of distill into 4 key challenges that as a result of all of this chaotic mess that happens. Sort of, if you want to go to the next slide. Essentially 4 things, right? Number 1, because there's like so many people touching and interacting with this document asset. Actually, sorry, I'll take a step back. This is a research from McKinsey, even though we talk about digital transformation, COVID's kind of accelerated digital transformation, there are a lot of industries where paper still rules. How many of you visited a doctor office where you're still signing the HIPAA declaration form on paper, where you're still filling out forms on paper, like pen and paper, right? Like like healthcare is one example. Financial services is the same thing. If you're closing a house, you're like wearing a wristband to your closing ceremony because you got so much paper to sign. So this whole thing that digital transformation is happening is yes, it's accelerating, but there is a lot of paper. Paper is still there, and for some reasons it's change control, but it's also like some of these systems are so far behind in terms of adapting and adopting technology, and there is so much manual process. The one highlight I will say, this past 6 to 9 months, we've seen a large amount of layoffs. Aside from like bad decisions of hiring, the number one was like bad accelerated hiring, but the number 2 reason was a lot of their stakeholders and stockholders are asking for efficiency and productivity. And manual processing is contradictory to that, right? If you go into a large organization, I was talking to a large SaaS company, and they have a sales operations team that's hundreds of people, right? Irrespective of how big they are, even if this was Salesforce, I know for a fact that Salesforce has a large sales operations team. And there's a lot of manual work that happens around this, right? So all of this combined doesn't eliminate paper or like the manual process around it. And so here are the problems that this all surfaces up, right? Because of these numerous people, outdated processes, quote unquote, manual in nature. Number one, you have different versions of a document, whether that's a contract, an NDA, an MSA. Like how many times have you had to deal with it where someone will say V22-Anand, V22-Joe. And then the moment you've done that, the customer's like, oh, 2 hours later, they say, hey, we've updated some terms. Here's a new version. And you were working on the other version. And now you have to take that, copy it over, or make a new version because you're afraid something will go wrong. So I've been in sales deals at Salesforce where we've had like version 342. And sometimes you're like, okay, what changed between the original and now? And why did this not make it? All of this happens. And you finally send it for signature. The customer's like, hey, that's not even right. We didn't even agree to this. What the heck? So the experience is so bad, right? Second is data. Data, because it's a document, and in many cases, it's a Word document that gets attached, a Google document that's linked. None of these are actually connected to the source data or the sources of data, if you will. CRM data, SAP data, billing data, AR data, all of that is not connected at all. So anytime you make changes to your underlying, say, so in the world of Sales Cloud, let's take the example of you've done the quote, you've generated, customer's good with the amount, everything's good. Last minute, they have a change. They want to take off a product, or you want to apply a discount because the customer's like, hey, if you give me this, we'll get this deal done. You have to go make the change. You'll make that change in Salesforce. Now, your document, which is this disconnected asset, is not aware of that change anymore. So now you're going to have to regenerate, copy paste it. Oh, copy paste is a human problem, right? You fat finger it, something goes wrong. There can be a lot of things that go wrong. How many times, I mean, if you talk to your customers, you would have seen this, right? So data disconnected of data, and the rules change. You add a new product or you removed a new product, then parts of the terms and conditions change. A sales rep's not going to know that. He's not a lawyer. He's not a legal team. So all of these rules change because of this dynamic nature. And all of this needs to happen in a trusted, secure, and private manner, right? Like people are emailing documents as attachments. As much as documents, I mean, emails, the most not secure system. Yes, you have two-factor authentication. Yes, you have a single sign-on. But every day, there's so many social attacks that you do. I mean, when I was at Salesforce and when Saurabh was at Salesforce, we used to have this team called the Red Team. They would send us like phishing emails just to make sure that we don't click on it. And if we clicked on it, we're supposed to go take a course. Yes, teams are very aware of it. Lots of companies are investing in this, but still, is email the most secure way of doing things, right? So that's like the 4 results of the dysfunction that I showed you in the last couple of slides. And then if we move on to the next one, Forrester has done a great research, and this was actually sponsored by one of the leading e-signature companies, DocuSign. And you call out some of the numbers, right? 60% of errors due to manual data entry, lack of visibility. If you think about a sales rep that's got a large deal and it's end of quarter and they want to get this done, but they have no idea where is this sitting. Is this with ops? Is this with RevRec? Is this with finance? Is this with legal? There's no transparency. And guess what happens? They're on Slack, iMessage, phone calls, email, every possible communication mechanism. And they're like, hey, what's the status? Can you get this done? What are we waiting on? So there is so much coordination. And there's another metric that we commonly share. 72% of a sales rep's time is spent on non-selling activities. 72%. I want that to be very, very clear. They spend 28% on selling activities. 72% is non, which is chasing people, admin work, creating codes, generating order forms, helping with legal in understanding the context, chasing people down for status. So the amount of productivity loss is so high, right? And then like at the end of all this, right? Like there's a lot of numbers and I'll let you all read in this, but at the end of this, there's rework, there's manual. All of this is impacting your revenue and bottom line, right? And why is that? Again, 4 simple themes. Manual processes resulting in extremely high error rates. And because of all of this, it's very, very slow, lack of agility. And like I mean, some of the sales teams that I've worked with at Salesforce, the moment it hits sales ops, they're like, God, it's there. I don't know what's going to happen. It's almost like it goes into a black hole. And, digital transformation, everyone talks about it. Everyone raves like we need to transform our enterprise. None of these other 3 are going to help you with digital transformation. It's going to slow you down and actually be a roadblock for digital transformation.
Yeah, I want to interject here for a minute, Anand. I think I didn't realize this, for a very long time. I think data and documents are the most underrated impediments to digital transformation. Most people just kind of, it's easy to throw money and buy some fancy technology and say, hey, we will do this, and here is how the end user experience will be. But, the road on which your digital transformation car is going to run is a road paved with data and with documents. And particularly data still gets enough airtime. Companies do talk about it. You have chief data officer. Documents, nobody thinks about it. And to your point, I mean, this has a direct revenue connection, right? I have a contract. I want the customer to sign it. And my sales ops is, challenged with doing things, the approval process, the redlining. Like, as you were saying, I was thinking about, I remember distinctly one customer that, we at Cloud Compliance went like 132 emails back and forth. And same thing, right? They'll attach a redlined version and we're like, what about this? Can we do this? How about that? And it's just crazy how much time, effort, and insecure practices that emanates from all of that.
And I think I'll highlight another one, right? So for those that are listening, the obvious questions like, hey, isn't this what a contract lifecycle management product is supposed to do? And they're like, yes. But, and off late, I've been talking to a lot of legal lawyers. I spoke to like 4 of them last week. CLM is being seen as a legal ops product. It is not being seen as a horizontal solution that sits across these multiple entities. Like, for example, like if you're in the services business, SOW drafting is a complex process. And legal comes into it from a risk and compliance perspective because there's usually not a lot of legal language other than assumptions and thou shall and all that. But just drafting that is not legal. A lot of that is actually done by the services teams, the architects, the project managers, and the program managers. So CLMs have actually over-rotated on being a special purpose approval process. And you're also like disconnected. You're doing your product entry in Salesforce. You're doing your approvals in a different place. Your documents are sitting in like Box or SharePoint or wherever. Again, multiple systems. I'm like, what's the latest version? What am I approving? So yes, CLM solves it, but it's also a huge gap and a problem.
Right.
So how does AI solve this? And maybe Saurabh, you want to take this?
Absolutely. So thank you, Anand. I think Anand spoke a lot about, some of the challenges, and like we were saying, this is such an underrated area. It doesn't get enough visibility into the enterprises, but it is certainly an Achilles heel, right? We do not realize how much it can impact what we do. But let's talk about AI, right? We have this shiny new kid on the block. What can it do? Can it really help you make changes to your document management? So let's start with something really simple, right? Like you have a bunch of things that happen in your Salesforce today, and a lot of them involve some amount of manual grunt work. You're trying to create reports, notes. I just had a call. I'm going to write some summary of it. All of that is happening, right? At a management level, I don't have enough time to see what each one of my team members is doing. I just want some sort of a summarized version of these things. And what AI can do is, whether you look at products like, Salesforce's AI Cloud, or you look at what we do with AppExchange, our AppExchange product, GPTfy, the idea is that, you can apply generative AI, think ChatGPT for the enterprises, and you can get some version of these things, right? So AI can look at content and it can generate contextually relevant email drafts that you can use to send out. You can summarize long, unwieldy text bodies, right? So you can get case summaries, you can summarize the 150 email on a case and come up with a consolidated summary. You can get a sentiment on how a customer felt about their cases and use that to, kind of do early highlight of red accounts and things like that. You can do intent analysis, things like that. So all of this is happening on the content front, right? And this is what typically happens. How does then this make its way into documents? Both ways. Can we analyze documents in this story? And can we generate documents, right? Those are two areas where we'll talk a little bit more of what AI can do from a possibilities perspective. Then Anand has some of the stuff that, he and folks at S-Docs are working on. He's going to talk a little bit about that. And then we'll jump into some of the demos around it, talk a bit about security and architecture. So the first really interesting use case of Salesforce plus AI when you think about documents is you can generate and combine documents. And it could be something like, I can generate proposals. I can generate custom emails based on customer context. And, I can associate relevant documents with it. One of the use cases that, we've looked at is how do you create like an account planning report, which kind of is really like a PDF type document, which has, here's the account, here's what they're doing, here's what they're planning to do in future based on their financial report. Here is a summary of opportunities in play. Here's a summary of cases in play. Here's what the rep thinks, right? All of this information. And out of this, there is about 30% information that doesn't exist in your Salesforce. That is either summarized by AI or it's generated by AI based on everything it's looking at. Some of the areas we are looking at is how can we pull information from publicly available sources, such as financial statements. So if I can, get, so GPTfy is working on this, where you will be able to pull like the last year's report, financial report, or the quarterly report that Salesforce publishes, where they talk about which direction they're going in future. Now, if you're a sales rep trying to sell to Salesforce, you can kind of look at that instead of looking at a 100-page document. So a lot of that kind of stuff you can bring into Salesforce and push it into a document. You can summarize product and solution proposals. And similarly, you can, this is my favorite, is like you get RFPs and now AI can kind of look at that, match it against your existing set of terms, conditions, clauses, existing offerings, MSAs, and kind of try to do a match and give you a version as the first draft so that you're not starting from scratch. These are some of these.
Can I add to this? The RFP please. One was interesting. I actually filled out 3 of them last week, and enterprises mid to large size, and ironically, all of them look for like the SOC 2 ISO 27000 on. So the questions are more or less the same. Do you have a business continuity plan? Do you have this? And a lot of times, it's like, hey, we're a native application like cloud compliance, and therefore a lot of what Salesforce offers applies to us. And a simple AI could just go and look, is S-Docs, is it native? Hey, is it sitting on Salesforce? and recommend the answers right there. Here's a SOC 2 report. Here's an ISO 7000 report. Here's a NIST report from Salesforce. And like, it can just ask me, like, is this what you want to share back as an RFP response, versus me having to craft it again and again and again and 4 times. One was in Excel, other was in a Word document, a third was like a SaaS platform called OneTrust. Same information, just 3 different ways.
We've all been there, but thanks for sharing. I completely agree with you. And I think there is a lot of opportunity, and we'll show a little bit of how, some of this can be done. The second part of this is very much in line with what Anand was mentioning, which is how can you analyze documents with AI, right? So not only can you combine and generate, because it is generative AI after all, but you can do analysis of it. So can you compare quotes from multiple vendors without manually scanning everything? And that's one of the demos that we'll show is we have 2 quotes, and AI can literally pull all this data, extract it, put it through an OpenAI on Azure, and actually give you a side-by-side comparison, make a recommendation, and tell you why it is making that recommendation. I think a lot of these kind of use cases will become possible with the generative AI. And the trick is to make sure that you always have a human in the loop, right? So you don't want AI to do all this automated decision-making and it goes out and digitally signs a contract on your behalf, right? I think that's the dystopian Robocop future we're all trying to avoid at this point. And the intention is that, you are able to, outsource a significant amount of that current work, offload it from your day-to-day, and have AI, do it for you. Similarly, you look at financial reports. As Anand was talking, we work with a lot of public sector organizations, and they have really large financial reports. If you look at some of these large police department financial reports, they run into 200-300 pages. Department of Transportation type of states run into 100 pages plus. There's a lot of information there, and the trick is, how do we extract out things that are relevant to us from our customers' context, from our competitors' point of view, and then leverage it into our sales cycle, into our customer success and things like that. Similarly, how do I analyze documents such as RFP against existing body of knowledge? Again, very sort of similar case that we talked about. And the last one that I like, and I know, Anand, you may have a comment on that one, is like, if you have a chatbot type capability that can go against a very large product PDF, a lot of customers have Salesforce knowledge base, other knowledge bases on other technologies, but still a lot of them who have legacy products have 300, 400, 500 page PDF, product manuals, and the ability to integrate that with AI so that, you can ask questions and get answers specifically from portions of that document with the references, another very interesting use case that, we are investigating right now. Anand, any comments?
No, Google compensates a lot for this today. But think about why Google or Stack Overflow has become particularly important. And I think I read somewhere that Stack Overflow has actually seen a dip in their traffic since OpenAI, Bard, and other tools like GitHub Copilot have brought in. And I think the theme there, and hopefully some of you who have been around for a while can recognize the word red book. IBM used to be very popular for this term, the red book. They were actually red colored books. They were manuals. So I'm dating myself, but irrespective, they were like these massive manuals, right? So, they had complex piece of technology with mainframes and DB2 on mainframes and things like that. But they had these red books and they were like massive. And for you to kind of go and understand, like, how does this work or what do I need to do? You had to kind of read through a lot of documentation, right? And, I was helping IBM through their service transformation. So IBM runs Service Cloud. And their largest issue is like, what do we do with some of this knowledge that's sitting in these massive PDFs? So their reps would get super trained and they're like getting specialized. But that's a great example of like this. Now, I'm sure IBM is rethinking that with their Watson X product. But irrespective, everyone's rethinking. And, Saurabh and I were talking, and we're going to talk about this more tomorrow. But the whole reason why ChatGPT and this whole generative AI thing has become so viral and huge is built on 2 fundamental things. One, it is conversational in nature. The UI is conversation. It is not a database query. It is not clicking 10 buttons. It's a simple question that I ask. And then the second is context. Those two are the single reasons why they are popular. And bringing conversations into the enterprise from an application perspective is what I see the next generation of CRMs in general is going to be, and where document automation will go as well.
Absolutely. Very well said. And with that, I think I'm going to let you talk a little bit more about this one.
Yeah. So I think AI, just aside from that, right? So if you think about this from a lens of compliance and all that, so and having spoken to a lot of lawyers recently, legal teams in companies are very small, right? So there's this growing term called legal ops, which essentially is the lawyer that reviews your contracts, your commercial contracts. They are small teams. They're not hundreds of lawyers looking, and they're looked at as a cost center. And when you're having a small team of 4 or 5 or 10 people that are dealing with hundreds and thousands of deals that flow through that require their attention, it is going to come to a grinding halt. And legal teams actually want to push things ahead in the upstream systems so that what comes to them is the most complex piece, right? So Saurabh and I are architects, and what I often say is, don't come to me with how do I write this validation rule in Salesforce. There's a million resources for it, and Salesforce has done amazing work in enabling your average business analyst, to be able to do that. Come to me with, hey, how do I integrate this 4 things, ensure that the data is always consistent, and be able to notify my end user and customer in real time. That's a complex integration that involves multiple systems. That requires work. Come to me with that, right? And lawyers are taking a very similar approach where they want to push this forward. So this notion of self-service, where a rep can go through and iterate through a document and say, hey, scan through a paper that the customer shared with me and tell me what's not in compliance with my enterprise standards, whether that's termination, indemnity, notice of, whatever, right? Like there's standard things. Almost every legal team has this checklist. AI and document AI can actually codify a lot of that checklist, move it to the self-service so that when a rep gets a contract out, they have a quick, immediate reaction to, this has about, 50% non-standard stuff to the rep, and you can put some calculations and formulas on top and say, like, the likelihood that this deal will close in the next 30 days is 2%. So for the rep, that's immediate, like, okay, maybe this is required, but I'm not going to commit this for this quarter. I'm going to put it for next quarter. I'm going to focus on something that I can actually close on this quarter. Well, continue this, right? So that's one example. Generating content in the SOW world, you want to generate like assumptions or, data migration requirements or customer commitments. A lot of services firms have like predefined, approved language. Guess where that is? It's in SharePoint. It's in some kind of like repository that's a copy paste, and then you can change it. So again, with AI, you can generate content. This is kind of like the most common use case. And then compliance checking, right? Does my contract or does my SOW hit all of these things? From a risk perspective, is my payment terms in line? Or my discount percent? Like some of this is done through Salesforce process and process builder stuff. But the moment it gets into the document, again, that disconnected data, I can go and change anything in the document and still not my discount percent and my opportunity and what's in my document will be completely different. How do you do compliance check? And how do you do this in a private first? It says privacy first, but private first. How do I do it such that when I am dealing with the document and I'm making changes, only I and only I can do it? And this is important because lawyers are very, very afraid of control being lost from them. So if they make a change, and if the other party can see it, then they'll get to react and it might change the sales tactic or whatever, right? So that's one of the reasons they actually use Word. I talk to a lot of lawyers and I ask them the first question, why do you guys like Microsoft Word a lot? And they're like, well, guess what? It's offline, it's disconnected, it's private. And I believe Docs from an AI perspective as well can give you that private first experience. Unlike Google Docs or unlike Quip or unlike, Office 365, that is a collaborate first experience. You are kind of like by default, when you comment, In Google Docs, you cannot say only this individual can see it, these individuals cannot see it. You either see all comments or you don't see any comments, plain and simple, right? So it is those four themes that at least I'm seeing, and we're seeing a lot of customers actually resonate with this. Back to you, Saurabh.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. This is a challenge across the board, I think, and particularly the kind of power users you're talking about. Like if you're a lawyer, you're like, I don't trust any of this. Good old word it works just well for me. I've been doing it for 15 years and I'm not going to change it. And you're right. Like, I think unless there is, there are solutions that categorically, highlight this trust and privacy first, and, it's closed by default unless you check a button and then specify who can have access to what. I think there is a lot of that kind of undercurrent that continues to hinder with like a broader adoption of these kind of technologies. All right. So with that, moving on, let's talk a little bit about security architecture. And I want to show you guys a really cool demo of attachments that you can leverage and see the potential of those things. So very quickly, this is a slide that we show because so many customers often ask this question and they're not clear. ChatGPT became famous, right, 6-7 months ago, and it's a consumer-facing website. And there were concerns around what happens to my data. Some engineer from Samsung posted something, it somehow got leaked. That was a big problem, right? But this is a consumer-facing website, and it runs on an open on a data model or on an AI engine called OpenAI, which is again built by an organization called OpenAI. So for a minute, if you think about enterprise applications, the idea is that you are running something like an OpenAI on some other private infrastructure where you have a dedicated access. So it could be OpenAI hosted on Azure. Microsoft Azure is the only one that does this. So if you are looking a like for ChatGPT, you could have OpenAI hosted on Microsoft Azure, or you can have Salesforce. Salesforce has a ton of these offerings that they can allow access to you. So you can get AI Cloud with those, or you can get from Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, Anthropic, all of those. But the idea is when you think about enterprise apps, we are not talking about some consumer-facing version of this. We are talking about, AI models that are specifically tuned for a certain set of security, compliance, privacy requirements, and some of the things that enterprise customers want and need. So just a little bit of clarification on that. So let's talk a little bit about how this works. So I'm taking an example of GPTfy, which is a Salesforce native app exchange product, but to a large degree, Salesforce's AI Cloud and, if you build something, all of those fit some version of this model, right, at a very broad level. What you're trying to do is you're trying to enable AI for your business. So you need to have an emphasis on usability, adoption, and really crafting the right kind of prompts. You need an ability to have optimized prompts, which is just the plain English of asking AI to do something and then distribute it to your users securely. Security and privacy are huge, and you want to enable it across the enterprise. So enabling AI in a secure manner across the enterprise, an example of that is all my data is not in Salesforce. It may be in documents. It will also be in non-Salesforce databases. It may be sitting in Oracle, SAP, some Microsoft SQL Server or others. And the thing I so love about Salesforce as a platform to leverage something like this is that with Salesforce, you can use technologies like Salesforce Connect, which lets you pull in data from other data sources, from external data sources, and show it inside Salesforce as if it's native Salesforce data. And those are called external objects. You can have a read-only access, a read, write, edit access to them. And what's cool about something like this is it lets you bring this data not only into Salesforce to see it, but what we've done is we actually can use that to send it to AI securely. So we can mix and match your Salesforce, non-Salesforce data and your documents and push it to an AI, get some responses back, and present it to your user or use it for automation. So I think just the 2-minute version of imagine the possibilities with AI and how far you can push the envelope. There is some very, very, very compelling areas. And, every vendor in this space is going to continue to innovate and invest heavily in it. I'm sure Salesforce is going to make some really cool announcements at Dreamforce. And we are doing a lot of work in this space. And if you are thinking about it, you want to not only think about what is in front of you in terms of what you're hearing, but one or two steps ahead of where this world is headed, right? We have to unlearn a lot of things that we do today and find opportunities to innovate in some of these areas. Anand, do you want to make a comment on this before I move forward? Anything here?
So, no, I this is every like you said, every vendor, every tech company is kind of chasing this concept, right? And I think data privacy is becoming a big part of this. How do you do this in a way that essentially is most secure and private to the data that is probably the most important asset in an enterprise is data. It doesn't really matter your IP, your data, and your people are the most important assets in the company, right? And OpenAI is kind of like somewhat opened up a glaring hole in that data privacy side. I think the most common example was Samsung. Samsung employees were actually using OpenAI to kind of do a whole bunch of this. They were probably testing it with like everyone else in the consumer space. What ended up happening was Samsung's proprietary IP got out in the public domain. And it OpenAI started to answer questions about something else with Samsung specific answers that was meant to be proprietary. You don't want that. I mean, the last thing Saurabh or I want is anything about our companies getting out of the public internet. And we're, ISVs, but irrespective, think about Salesforce and their roadmaps getting out of the public internet, or a large financial services firm that is kind of going through a tough time. Worried about that getting out. There's just so many things that can go wrong with privacy. It's a big focus. There are so many companies that are trying to solve this. Saurabh and I talk about this as well. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's the part I like about where some of these things are headed, because we don't come, like cloud compliance and GPTfy don't come from an AI background. We come from a data security background. And that's why, when we looked at this, we also ended up building like a security layer, right? So in our world, when you click a button, and this is not very different from how Salesforce's trust layer works. The idea is we are extracting information out of Salesforce and we are masking it inside Salesforce. So we are replacing, all the values here with, some sort of masked or anonymized version. So sort of becomes person one, for example. So then when we are sending it to OpenAI, what you're sending is a masked version, which has, hopefully very little or no PII, no sensitive information in there. And then OpenAI or whatever AI you use here, that model does what you asked it to do. So summarizes, does some analysis, things like that. And it presents that data back into your Salesforce where, we would re-identify it and we would present it to the user. We can also update specific fields on your record. So that way you can trigger flows, approval, escalation, things like that. This is kind of a very generic, simple way of looking at how you want to enforce security and, alleviate some of the concerns around AI usage with your, Salesforce data. So let me jump into a demo and show you some of these things really quickly. I'll go through a few different ideas. The first one I want to show you is just how AI can generate content. And then I'll show you how AI can generate, analyze content in a document. So I'm on an account record here, right? And this account has obviously a bunch of things associated. It's got some cases, some opportunities, and essentially what's happening is, right, I want to do an account planning. I need to sit with my boss and he's like, okay, how's Golden Gate Capital doing? And I want a version of this. So I can run this thing from here. I can select account 360. And when I click this, what essentially ends up happening is GPTfy is extracting this data, masking it, sending it to, in this case, OpenAI on Azure, getting back a response, re-injecting some of that information that it had masked, so demask or unmask it, and then it'll present it to you. And so basically, that's what's happening through all of this stuff here, right? And it will then create a table. What's interesting is some of these things on this table, the summary, the sentiment, the objection, the next best option, and this summary here, they don't natively exist in Salesforce. This is AI generating content for you. So the ability now to take this and push it into a PDF, using technologies like S-Docs is there, right? If you really needed to build a robust account plan, you can take this information and generate out a PDF version if you need it. You can do similar things for quotes. You can do similar things for literally any piece of data inside Salesforce. If you wanted to apply AI to summarize it, to do some sort of analysis and run it. And when you're doing this, what you want is for your your solution to actually anonymize it before it sends it out. So I'm sorry, my internet connection is a bit slower today, unfortunately, but you should see this in a minute of how this data is well tagged. We are masking some of the information before it's pushed out. Any comments on anything, Anand, while
yeah, I mean, that's a pretty cool use case, right? Like it's common, kind of like this whole summarization, I think is coming up a lot. And I think, this is a productivity gain for a lot of people, right? Imagine you're a new salesperson that's taking over a large account and you essentially want to know who's who in the zoo from a customer perspective. And you kind of want to know what zoo are you walking into? Like, are you walking into like a dinosaur cage or a meerkat cage, right? I think, right? People churn. You want to know what's going on. So I think that's a pretty cool demo. Sorry.
Thanks. And so, as you can see, right? So we pulled all this data. It's a very well tagged JSON because we want to make sure AI doesn't misinterpret it. And we have pulled out some of the, PII, right? Like it's pulling out some email address and replacing it with, really sort of masked information. And then this PII removed data is sent to AI. And then AI does its processing, it brings it back, and, we are generating a well-formatted table out of it. And essentially, the prompt is really simple, right? That's kind of the gamut of things that we are doing. And because it's already gotten through all of this, literally at this point, the ability to push it into something like an S-Docs and generate out a really great document is there, right? We can combine data from different sources and then push it out and create a PDF, if you need to get signatures or do whatever. Like all of that capability that you already have or can have, AI now can just hook into it and enrich it even further to enable, newer use cases, to enrich the kind of processes and data that you have and empower your reps to do more things, spend hopefully less than 72% of time in non-sales activities. So that's that. Very quickly, I wanted to show you how a prompt looks like, and then I'll show you some stuff around documents, right? So this is the prompt, and it has a connection associated with it. And this is where you can tweak settings in terms of temperature and things to get a realistic version of things. And what's happening here is that you see that in this prompt, we are sending information. So we can actually specify what kind of data do we want to send to AI. And you can also specify which of these do I want to anonymize. So I've picked an account name here to anonymize, for example, and I'm just saying scan for this. So we will scan for this information in long text field and regular fields and basically anonymize it before it goes out. So that's the part that, back to security, this is fundamental to a lot of things that our customers want to do. Another thing is, the related objects, right? So child, grandchild data that I may be sending, I may only want to send specific things. I may only want to send open cases, right? So I have a where clause and I can say where status is, not equal to closed, or where status is equal to open. And then I can just get a set of records that we're sending to AI. So you have ability to control at every level what information you're sending and what information, and in what form, right? Is it anonymized? Is it going as is? So that's really the gist of it. I'm going to jump quickly and show you the document one. Any comment on anything else, Anand?
Well, I mean, I didn't get to demonstrate something on the S-Docs side, partly because I want to kind of keep it under wraps for Dreamforce, but we are going to be announcing something around AI at Dreamforce. We're doing some early days research work around that, and you'll be pleasantly surprised with what we're about to embark on.
Oh, nice. A surprise. Well, I will look forward to it. All right. So let me show you now a case for documents, right? So I'm on an account record. And on this account, I have two quotes, right? I am selling some power solutions. So I have a quote for diesel-based generator, just a simple regular quote with like, hey, here's capacity of these things, how much installation, maintenance, and some cost and all of that. All of this data, by the way, is generated by ChatGPT, so it's all fake data. So this is my first quote for diesel generators, and I have another one for propane-based generators. And I need to kind of figure out which one do I want to, go forward with.
The doc gen, Saurabh?
Not yet. I couldn't configure it in time, but we should definitely do another one of these talks and configure it end to end. We will. So this is what we have. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just, run this code comparison. And essentially what it'll let me do is I'm going to associate these two files with it and attach them and then hit run GPTfy. And what it's doing is it already has a prompt which just says, hey, compare these two documents. So these are now going to Azure, and the data will get extracted from these PDFs. So it takes a minute or two. It will then send it to OpenAI on Azure and say, hey, here's this information. Go compare this, give me a summary, make a recommendation, tell me why you picked the one you picked. And then we should see this back. So this is, when it comes back, you'll see this is an excellent example of how we can think beyond what we typically think of when we think of, chat GPT type scenario. All you hear about generative AI is I can write movie stories, I can write poems, I can do summarization of emails, cases, opportunities, sentiment, intent, account 360, all the stuff that some of which I talked about. That's all possible. We do this today for all of our customers. But I think this is the kind of space that we all want to go into, right? As you can see, so it looked at both of them and it's come back. And this is completely AI generated, right? It's compared all of those things, which is fine, which is just a comparison. What's interesting is it talks about the summary here. It's like, hey, one of them is about this, the other is about this. It's recommending quote one because it believes it is a lower total investment, because it is 146 and the other one is more expensive. It also has some fuel efficiency and stuff like that. This is kind of where I think it is so powerful, right? If we are able to do this for very, very large documents, if we are able to do this for the RFP scenario that you were talking about, then all of a sudden you are enabling a whole new kind of thing. Now, factor into this that I have this data here, and now I can click a button here and send this information to something like S-Docs and generate out a comparative analysis, right? If you are a procurement person in an organization and you're looking at a whole ton of these, quotes coming in, if you are doing any other sort of comparison of document by document by document, looking at products, looking at strategy, looking at, financial statements, your ability to, analyze all of this and then put it together cohesively into a third document using a document generation technology is, I think, really, really powerful. Any comments, Anand, from you on this? Any thoughts?
Well, I think this touches upon kind of like this notion of doc analysis and this notion of self-services, right? That I talked about earlier on the slides, right? This kind of is a practical example of self-service, right? So that if you're like an underwriter, right? An underwriter understands like all the ramifications of the complex insurance instrument. But if you're a sales agent that is trying to sell to a company insurance, you may generate multiple variations based on the conversation. And if the customer's like, what's different? What's better? What is this? What is that? I think they don't have to go back to the underwriter or the person that's like the product specialist. They can kind of like give some ready-made answers. Now, obviously, you don't want to use AI in the public domain. You want to build like a more trained model that's within your enterprise. But keeping that aside, it sounds like you guys can hook into any model. But keeping that aside, I mean, that's kind of the goal, right? Self-service, moving some of the work upstream or downstream, depending on which direction you're wanting that information to be pushed down, makes a huge difference. So that now this underwriter is not under a lot of pressure to kind of answer 10 questions. They're focused on the 2 insurance contracts that are actually requiring their expertise and skill.
Yeah. I think I was just thinking about your earlier example around lawyers looking at, different versions of the same document. That may be another interesting use case where you go, okay, what was my version 1? What's my version 35? And tell me what has actually changed materially between those two. Those kind of things for very, very large documents, maybe another example. It's interesting, Anand, that you mentioned insurance, because we actually built this functionality for that specific industry. We had, we have a pilot customer that was like, this is what we need to do. They are in commercial insurance, and they're like, we want the ability to, compare, our quote with the competitors, because that's what the customer is like. I pay X amount of money. You guys are Y. Tell me why you're better. And they're like, send us what you have, and you can do a comparison and say, our coverage is different. Ours is better. People who are underwriting this are better. We have more financial solvency, things like that.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, there's a whole new world around just, again, humans being conversational to documents being structured, or data being structured and unstructured. Bring all that together. You like, this is why Google became Google. This is why OpenAI became the 100 million in a year, right? And like, I think we're on the cusp of something unique. And this is very enterprise friendly, right? Like every example of OpenAI that we say is like, I can write a cool song. I can kind of do all that. Like, yes, that's all cool stuff. In fact, that coolness is wearing off. What does this mean for my revenue? What does this mean for my top line and bottom line? That answer, a lot of people don't clearly have.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's particularly even with OpenAI, right? Like 2 days ago, they announced OpenAI for enterprise, and that is their whole intention. Like now you can get OpenAI hosted by their infrastructure. That's an option. What I've found is with a lot of large enterprises, they already have a strategic relationship either with Microsoft Azure or with Google Cloud or with AWS.
Yeah.
At least one of them, if not two. And all of these vendors either have or are in this crazy race to offer very, very robust AI capabilities and all the related plumbing for it. So I think it's going to be a great.
You and I are going to talk about it again tomorrow,
Yes.
about this topic in a lot more depth as well. Because I think, yes, all of this is cool, and I think that but actually requires a good amount of thinking from security and a whole lot of other things.
Absolutely. All right. So with that in mind, a quick look at some of the resources. Everything that we're talking about is available from one place. You can just go to this link. It is a LinkedIn group that you can join. Every session that we are recording, every asset, you will find a way to, to get access to it. And it just makes it easier for us. I've been to so many conferences where things are just lying around. So we really wanted to consciously do this. You can get this white paper, which talks about how you can navigate to, the future world of AI and how you can bring it to your organization. There is a data sheet for GPTfy that you can look at. Anand, do you want to talk a little bit about this?
I think this is S-Docs' capabilities in a nutshell today. What we're announcing at Dreamforce and beyond will add a whole lot more chiclets to this. But irrespective, this is what we have today. We've been very successful with this, but stay tuned for more.
Absolutely. And if it's okay with you, Anand, I'll make sure that our marketing posts this in the group as well, so people can look at it. Right. All right. So that's it. This is the group. This is the LinkedIn. You can scan the QR code and go there. If you're looking for use cases on some of these things that we talked about, you can definitely get them on our website. We put a lot of these PDFs for Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, I think Health Cloud, and we will shortly put for FSC, Financial Services Cloud. So you can go here on guides, and there is, I think, 4 or 5 of them that specifically talk about, some of those areas. So I do see a question here. What are some emerging trends in document automation that Salesforce users should be aware of? So Anand, if you want to take that one.
I think the biggest trend that I'm seeing is the document as we know is fundamentally needing to be changed. Like I said, like in some of the slides, today the document's a monolithical asset, right? A PDF or like a Word document. And because of that medium, it's disconnected, no security and whatnot. I think that is fundamentally changing. And we're kind of like tapping into that quite a bit, right? So that to me is the biggest. And then how do you become more embedded into the process versus it being its own bespoke process where I need to go click a button to generate a document versus I'm generating a code. At the end of it, there's actually a document already available, right? So how do you kind of make that more frictionless? Those are like the two big things that I see. And of course, be more enterprise-wide versus just Salesforce.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point. I would echo that too. I think the emerging trends in AI and document automation, frankly, in some ways we are just getting started. But I think the point that Anand made about documents being disconnected from data is so profound to me. Like literally the minute you push it out in an email, it's done. It does not speak to anything on your enterprise. So I think I think we'll see a lot more integration with AI and with data in documents, hopefully in the next couple of years, hopefully. And someday we'll be able to retire paper, but I'm not holding my breath for it. Yeah. Gerald had a question. This demonstrates sales process from the selling company. It would be interesting to see this data collected, managed, and analyzed from the enterprise buyer's perspective. How do they organize all the quotes received, all the emails sent and received? I think, Gerald, it's a great question. I would kind of go back to a little bit in the Salesforce world, right? Like I do have the ability to I was talking with a customer that actually does something like this. They built like a custom app inside Salesforce where they get a lot of these nomination type things that they look at and they figure out what projects they want to fund basically. And so they've built some custom objects where they're getting all of this information. And I think to your point, it is interesting indeed, like how do they do it? Today, most companies don't, right? They probably sit either in some sort of a procurement software or they're flying around in emails. I think for a vast majority of companies, it is the latter, and they're flying in through emails and they may be collecting it into some shared SharePoint drive, Google Drive, something like that. But if they were in Salesforce and the way like we were demonstrating, whether you're a buyer or a seller, you now have the ability to sort of do an analysis of them. Anand, anything you want to add?
No, I think, again, the concept you demonstrated was more inside Salesforce, but again, the technology that you're using is not Salesforce. It could be Salesforce with Einstein GPT or AI Cloud, but irrespective, it's OpenAI, it could be Bard, it could be Cloud, it could be any one of these, right? Those technologies have no underpinning to Salesforce, and therefore you could argue a Coupa, which is like a supplier and vendor management software, could integrate. I'm pretty sure they already have some AI where you're kind of like bringing in. So I think I would almost say that this becomes a thing like insurance was a great example that Saurabh you mentioned. A lot of auto insurance for those that live in North America. A lot of auto insurance providers do the comparative quote, right? Amazon does like compare to on products. It's very static structured comparisons, whereas you could just take two TVs in the product sheet and like compare these two and tell me what's different. True, right? True. At the consumer level, you could do that.
That's a very interesting example. I agree. All right, there's another question here. Is it only for indexed documents? So Goldie, I'm not sure if I follow what you mean when you say indexed documents. The demo that we showed was just using Salesforce attachments, right? Like Salesforce files and attachments, which is content version under the hood. So I was on an opportunity, and basically we had just attached those to PDF to it. Like I could literally click on upload file and attach. That's all it was. So there is no indexing or anything per se. If Salesforce does any, I don't think we particularly care because we're just sending this data, and a lot of this is happening on the Azure AI side. So it's OpenAI, Azure Cognitive Services, those kind of things are what we are using. All right, let me see if there are any other questions. Gerald, I hope we answered your question. And if there's another comment, please do put it in the chat. I am looking through this. Are there any other questions? No, I think we answered these questions. Yeah, I don't know, Anand, anything else from your perspective?
No, I think this was a fantastic conversation. We'll look forward to the continued engagement in LinkedIn and otherwise. Absolutely. And, like I said, please do join here. You can reach out to Anand on LinkedIn. I think someone from our team shared his LinkedIn URL. So please do reach out to him or to me if you'd like to. All right. I think we are done. We answered Gerald's question. He said, all good. All right.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. We do have an upcoming webinar on tomorrow. And actually, on one of them, we have Anand. And so we are talking about financial services cloud and business building your roadmap. So those are the two sessions tomorrow. We hope you get a chance to join us, and then we will share all these session recordings through that LinkedIn group. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, guys.